So you saved 2 million for retirement. You did everything right. You saved consistently. You invested wisely, and you made real sacrifices over the decades. And yet, when you finally get there, something unexpected happens. You still hesitate before booking that cruise. You think twice before helping the kids. And maybe you put off those things that you told yourself you were saving for. I hear this almost every week right now, and I've seen it enough times that it doesn't surprise me anymore, but it still really gets me. The people who aren't spending, they're not people who made bad decisions. They're just families who did everything right. And they still can't quite give themselves permission to enjoy what they spend a lifetime trying to achieve. My name's Chris McClure, and I've been a financial advisor for over 31 years. And I put these videos together about once a week. And hopefully it's honest information for high net worth families who have worked too hard to leave money on the table. So let's get started. There's a researcher named Michael Kitces who went back through more than 150 years of US market history, every 30-year retirement window since the 1870s. And what he found was that running out of money was the exception, not the rule. You see, most people finished with more than double what they started with. Some finished with 5 times more, if you can believe it. These are real numbers. People retire with $2 million and they withdraw $80,000 a year. And then you adjust for inflation. In almost all historical periods, you still have millions left at age 90. You see, that math is more forgiving than most people give themselves credit for. Researchers call the gap between what a portfolio could safely support and what someone actually spends is called the consumption gap. The consumption gap are the trips that we keep pushing back, or the cruise that we decided not to take, or the fact that we want to help our kids, but we just talk ourselves out of it. A lot of families, they carry this regret and they carry this quietly for a long time. And so today I want to walk you through 4 different traps that quietly cause families not to spend in retirement. And if you stay with me through the end, I'm going to show you why most families at this level could actually spend between $20,000 and $40,000 more per year than they currently are. I mean, $40,000, that's like $3,000 or $4,000 a month. It's a lot of dough. And one of the 4, it's the one almost no one talks about. And it's the one, in my experience, that it's the most expensive one. So if the math says you can spend, why don't people spend? I watched it happen. Disciplined, successful people, the kind who built real wealth over 30 years, they make this one mistake over and over, and it costs them more than any one market crash ever did. You see, most of the people I work with, they spent 30 or 40 years in the same financial mode. They're just saving constantly. They're saving more than they spend. They're socking money away. They're delaying gratification. They don't touch the principal. Those are just habits, and they're habits that die hard. It becomes part of how they see themselves. It's part of their identity. And then retirement arrives, and suddenly the whole playbook is supposed to flip. You're supposed to stop saving. Now you're supposed to start drawing down the thing you spent a lifetime building. And for a lot of people, it just feels wrong. It's not financially wrong. It's not morally wrong, but it's sort of like betraying what you thought your financial life was all about. I had a client a few years ago. He was a retired engineer. He was super methodical. He liked his spreadsheets. And we ran numbers 6 different ways. Every scenario we showed, he could spend nearly $100,000 a year. And he would never run out of money, not even come close. He came back a few weeks later and said he wanted to try living on 60. And so I asked him why. If we proved you could do 100, why on earth would you spend 60? And he just said it felt safer. And what I realized, even though he was an engineer, is that it wasn't a math problem. We already solved the math. We already proved that he could spend $100,000. It was basically those decades of conditioning that don't switch off. They don't switch off because a calendar says you're retired, and they don't switch off because some knucklehead financial advisor tells you you can do it. You see, a lot of people, they're waiting for someone to tell them it's okay, not just a financial plan. Because I've had thousands of conversations with clients about their financial plan. They need actual permission. And I have these conversations where we walk through a detailed projection. We show them the numbers clearly, and they look up and said, so you're saying we can actually do that? And the plan says yes. The math says yes. But no one had ever said it out loud to them before. And what I've noticed is most families at this level, they've done their homework, right? They're smart people. They've saved money. They've accumulated $2 million or more. So they know about the 4% rule. They probably have rebalanced their portfolio. Maybe they even have a financial advisor and they feel like they have a handle on it. And the thing is, those folks, that's usually around when the problems start happening. And these problems that I'm about to describe, they cost real money because they're focused on the right questions, but they're missing the ones they didn't know they even need to ask. And there's really 4 traps, 4 questions, 4 issues that people have. And the last one, I think, is the most important. So stick around. The first trap is once you have $2 million in investments, the industry, your friends, your family, they start paying attention to you differently. And you start getting pitched things that sound exclusive: private credit, structured notes, real estate, glossy brochures, beautiful packaging. And most of those kind of weird investments or those private investments, they're high fee, they're low liquidity structures that rarely outperform the straightforward portfolio that got you here. I've seen several clients that start investing in restaurants or private rental real estate, things of that sort. And those programs, they rely on leverage. They rely on lockup periods and polished marketing more than anything else. And I see them, they're pitched just as aggressively to families with $30 million as they are to families with $2 million. And that rarely makes sense on either end. And so before you say yes to anything new, you got to ask yourself, what does this actually cost? What does it cost all in? Because complexity gets mistaken for sophistication more often than it should. The second trap is most $2 million portfolios are heavily pre-taxed, meaning that they've been invested in IRAs, they've been invested in 401ks, or they've been invested in pensions. It's not a problem now, but it creates a big one down the road. You see, when required minimum distributions start, or the forced out of money out of these IRAs around 73 or 75, depending on how old you are, the IRS is going to force that money out whether you need it or not. That income pushes you into a higher tax bracket. It triggers a 2-year look back on Medicare surcharges. And a lot of people didn't see this coming until it's already happened. And you see, recent tax legislation, it actually locked in the big, beautiful bill, right? It locked in relatively low rates for now, but it didn't do anything about the national debt. It actually added to it. And so it's very likely that in the future, tax rates are going to be higher than they are today, which means there may be a window worth taking advantage of before things shift, before those tax rates go up. Maybe we do some Roth conversions today before RMDs force the issue. And the thing is most advisors, whether it's a CPA, an investment person, or what have you, are optimizing for last year's tax bill. The better way to think about it is a lifetime of tax exposure, where different assets, they sit in different accounts across different income layers and across different time frames. And by thinking about it that way, it allows us to do things like keep you below the thresholds for the next tax bracket or the Medicare surcharge. It's really a more integrated way of thinking about this problem. And the fact is, at this level of assets, those decisions, that way of thinking matters a lot more. The third trap is when you were in your 40s and the market dropped, it probably felt manageable. In retirement, the same drop of 20 or 30% feels different, and the reason is timing. You see, a 20% decline on $500,000 is $100,000. It's uncomfortable, but it's not structurally damaging. A 20% decline on $2 million is $400,000. On $10 million, it's $2 million. So if that happens early in retirement while you're withdrawing, it's a lot harder to get it back. And so here's how much it can actually matter. These are 2 portfolios. They start with the same exact amount. They start with $2 million, and they're both pulling $80,000 a year. They both get the same average return of 8% over 30 years. The only difference is when they hit the bad years. The one that takes his losses early ends up with about $3 million. So the 20% decline happens in the first few years. The one that takes the losses or that 20% decline later on in their lifetime ends up with almost $6 million. So it's the same returns, it's just in different order, and there's a $3 million difference, or in this case, it's nearly double if the down markets happen towards the end. You see, that's what makes timing so consequential, especially in retirement. It means more than it did when you were accumulating, when you were 40 years old and you were saving in your 401k. It's just more meaningful now. And the way to manage this is you want to think about your financial life in a 3-bucket approach. This is the kind of thing that we work with folks on. It's coordinated by time horizon and tax treatment. The first bucket is, like, say, 2 years or so of expenses in cash and short-term bonds. In a down market, you never have to sell anything. You just use the cash bucket. The second bucket is income-producing assets, things like real estate or bonds or assets that produce tax-efficient income. And that's really for year 3 or 4 through year 10. The third bucket is for long-term growth. And that would be where your Roth IRA would be placed, and also where your long-term stocks would be placed, or the assets you think are going to grow fast over time. You also typically put your tax-free assets like a Roth, or assets that are going to grow tax-favored, in that long-term bucket as well. By creating those 3 bucket systems, it takes the worry out of retirement, and it also makes those early drops less of an issue for you in retirement. And there's a fourth trap. And this is the one I said almost no one talks about. At $2 million, if you have a good portfolio and you've done your job and you've saved well, that portfolio will probably outlive you. But without intentional planning, there's a real chance it won't outlive your children, because about 70% of wealth disappears by the second generation, and roughly 90% by the third. And in most cases, it's not bad markets or irresponsible heirs. It's that families never had honest conversations about money. They never talked about values or intentions until it was too late. The first step, it's not a living trust, it's not a will, it's actually a conversation with your kids, maybe even your grandkids, about what this money means and what went into building it, what you'd want them to understand, what principles you hope they'll carry forward. I've watched well-drafted legal documents fail to produce what the families intended because they never had the conversation. They never did the foundation, they just never talked to their family. And so you think about it, that's the foundation. And from there, you build around it. Helping the kids with the house, educating the grandchildren, having the right kind of trust, the right planning for charitable giving. It's all part of the planning. And legacy planning done well, it's really about continuity. It's making sure what you built means something beyond you. It's not about the money. It's not about the success. It's actually about passing on your values and giving them a foundation for financial success. As I said earlier, there's a reason why these traps keep happening, even to people with plenty of money, and it isn't about the portfolio. Most families at $2 million or more, 2 million, 5 million, 10 million, is they have some level of advisory team. They typically have a CPA, they have maybe an estate planning attorney, maybe they have an investment person. But in the vast majority of cases, those 3 people, they're not talking to each other. They're not coordinating anything. Each one stays in their lane. And nobody's holding the whole picture. No one's looking at your entire financial picture at one time. You see, when was the last time your CPA read your investment statement, or your investment person read your trust, or your attorney read your tax return? The answer is almost always never. The reason I bring that up is, like a Roth conversion that makes complete sense from a tax perspective, it might create problems with your Medicare down the line. A trust that was drafted correctly but doesn't coordinate with your investment accounts, it could fail to do what you intended. Or an investment strategy that looks good on paper, but generates income that pushes your tax situation into a higher bracket, that can hurt. Not long ago, I had a client doing everything right by the numbers. And when we sat down and looked at all 3 pieces together for the first time, we found out she was losing about $100,000 a year to a combination of avoidable Medicare taxes and an asset location problem that her previous advisor had never flagged. And it was over 20 years, that's $200,000 that should have gone into her lifestyle. And see, I mean, none of these mistakes, none of them feel like emergencies, but that's what makes them dangerous. And over a long retirement, the accumulated cost of planning in a silo, it adds up in ways that are genuinely pretty hard to see until someone takes the time to look at it. You see, that's where I spend most of my time on. I'm sort of a weirdo. I actually read estate planning documents, I read tax returns, I read investments and insurance statements to make sure everything is working together. And in my experience, that's where most of the value at this level is. Not an extra 1% on your investment return, but making sure that everything is coordinated. And it's why most of the families I work with could be spending an extra $20,000 to $40,000 more per year than they currently are. Not because their investments are wrong or their taxes are wrong, but because no one's coordinating it. And so this last story I want to leave you with is something that happened to a client of mine recently. She had just retired. She put away $3 million. She did it carefully over her long career. And her husband had a long list of places they wanted to go. They wanted to go to Europe. They wanted to do a safari. They wanted to drive around the US in an RV. And the money was there, but the time was finally there. And unfortunately, she got cancer. and she couldn't travel that much. And about a year later, she passed away. You see, the money was never the obstacle. Like, we used to talk about her doing this all the time. They just kept waiting for the right moment. Maybe we'll do it next year. Maybe we'll do it one more quarter. Maybe when things settle down. It wasn't tomorrow, it was always sometime in the future. And so I always think about her when someone tells me she's going to take that trip next year. And so the families I work with who've done all this right, they've saved well, they've diversified, they've rebalanced, they still call me nervous about spending. A $2 million portfolio put together with real coordination across investments, taxes, legacy planning, it can support somewhere between $80,000 and $120,000 a year in spending before Social Security or before a pension. And so the math, in general, it supports living well in retirement. The question is whether your plan is actually built to let you do that over the next 34 years. And so if you'd like to understand what your picture looks like, how much you can spend, where your tax exposure is, whether the different parts of your plan are working together or quietly working against each other, there's a link in the description to schedule a call. I'd be happy to walk you through it. I'd love to chat with you. Hopefully this was a helpful video. Please feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.